So with me today, I have David Evans. So David Evans.
I'm an electrical engineer with about 18 years experience in the market, and more recently about 8 years experience in the energy markets.
Elena?
Hi, yes, my name is Elena. I'm working mainly on my background is mainly on the project development side of the business, but increasingly looking at retail strategies and how to incorporate renewable energy into a typical retail procurement strategy.
Okay. And I did forget about myself. I'm Matthew van der Linden. I'm the director of the business. Been working in the industry for more than 20 years with a core focus in our businesses to save businesses money. And Flow Power is the model that we're pursuing at the moment to try and bring the savings to our end users. So I'll get started. So the aim of today is we're going to talk briefly about the changing energy market and talk about why we believe solar PPAs are so important to the market. We'll talk about solar minus the panels and explain what that means. We'll give you an example of of how it works in practice, and then we'll take your questions at the end. So the changing energy market. So here you can see a lovely picture of Josh Frydenberg and Jay Weatherall. Everyone may remember this very tense conversation on the news. But I guess what's happening is it's in the news every second day. We're seeing power is very topical. We have SA being blacked out and numerous comments about not enough gas, or gas is expensive, or we need to install a whole lot of battery storage. We believe at Flow Power that there's also another solution that's potentially not being talked about a lot, and that is really to pursue our philosophy, and that is to provide customers that direct access to the wholesale market, but also direct access to the solar. And we actually do firmly believe that that is actually part of the solution, not the whole solution, but part of the solution to the current energy crisis that's going on in the market. So I just want to briefly go through and explain my reasoning of why we think that is in the marketplace. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here is what we have is a chart that shows us two lines. One, the orange line is the average market price in October 15. Then in October 16, we've got today's average market price. And you can see that the fundamental price of energy during the day, during the typical day in the market, has changed quite dramatically. Now, the reason for that change fundamentally is because solar is coming online in the market, and it's making the price of energy during the middle of the day get a lot cheaper, and on the edges there a lot more expensive. Now, at the moment, with the fixed contract market that most of you would be a part of, you're unable to access those lows. What you end up paying for is an average price in the market across the entire market. So at the moment, that's basically the market is governed by that, and probably 98% of the load that's consumed by consumers is through those fixed contracts. That gives you no visibility of this underlying pattern, and as more solar and wind comes online, those opportunities or that lower priced energy will get even lower and lower. So you can see, if you're reading the papers, you'll see a lot of discussion about these very large solar farms that are coming online, and there is an awful lot in the pipeline to be built at the moment. There's, I think, something like 5 gigawatt hours in the pipeline. Not all of that will probably get built, but there's an awful lot of load. And to give you a bit of a feel, we recently had Hazelwood shut down. That's about 1 or 2 gigawatt hours, gigawatts of load. So there's an awful lot of solar and wind in the pipeline to be built. So most of that load is going to the big three. It's being bought up by the big three, and there's a very, very good reason why they're buying that load up. So let me explain to you why that is. So this is a very rough example of what's happening, and it's very simplified. It doesn't take into account a lot of other components, but it gives you a very good picture of what's actually going on. So a typical solar farm, if you're reading in the paper, they're getting cheaper and cheaper. So those solar farms are worth about 8 cents a kilowatt hour is roughly what's the output from those solar farms is around about that, and they've been bought up by the big three largely at the moment. Now, in today's market, you've probably, if anyone's been out to market to get pricing from today's market, you'll have seen that the price of energy has risen dramatically and you're paying roughly around 15 cents for peak energy. And the LGC price that comes from a typical solar farm is also about 8 cents. So all things being equal, if you had a solar farm running today, you could sell that energy potentially. You can take it from the solar farm at about 8 cents and sell it off to the market at 25. So it's a massive difference, and it's a massive saving that's available. It almost seems too good to be true, that sort of difference in the market price. But unfortunately, what's happening at the moment is there isn't really any available mechanism for consumers to access that very low price that's coming from those very large solar farms, and it's at the moment it's going to the big three. So you can try and work out yourselves why you're not seeing that fantastically low price. But our job today is to try to provide a mechanism, and we have provided a mechanism for you to be able to access that price. Access that price. So this is the next stage that we want to talk into it, where we talk about our corporate purchase agreements and how we can provide a mechanism for you to get a slice of the cake, and how we can open up that market to give you access to solar at these unbelievably low rates. So we call it solar minus the panels.
So thanks, Matthew. So we're going to have a look at currently how the market works with retailers, and that will further get us into an example of how a solar PPA would work for your business. So most of you are familiar with this particular model, which is you sign a contract with the retailer supplies power to run your business, the retailer buys their energy from the wholesale market, and then you get a bill and which you pay for each month for your electricity. So it's a pretty straight, simple model. It's been around for some 20 odd years, and most customers are very familiar with this. But let's look into a little more about how the retailer acquires their energy from the market, and following on from what Matthew's just covered. So the retailers buy their energy from the floating spot market. In fact, all retailers are required to buy their energy at the floating wholesale spot price. They also buy hedging contracts from the market, and a good example of that is the ASX Energy Futures, a public website that's available to anyone, where you can see the hedging contracts, and these basically allow the retailers to offer fixed rates by hedging this floating spot price. Lastly, retailers also buy directly from generators. They can be fossil fuel like coal and gas, or they can also be renewable like wind and solar. And following on from the example, retailers now are acquiring low-cost energy from renewable plants like wind and solar into their retail portfolio. The problem with that is how it gets passed on to the customer. The model that we offer here, or the model that Flow Power is promoting there, solar minus the panels, actually directly connects the customer to the generation source. So it's like having solar on your site without the hassle of installing any panels or having to manage any project, but getting access to the low-cost generation from renewable sources like solar.
So basically, how does it work? It's quite a simple contractual arrangement where a business will agree to buy power direct from a generator in the NEM. This can be wind or solar power, as we mentioned. That power comes at a fixed rate over a particular number of years, and it can be anything from 5 to 10 years to up to 25 years. So most people probably are familiar with the model of having solar PV on your rooftop or on your property. The way that this is different, as we've mentioned, is that the solar is located anywhere. It can be located anywhere. So somewhere in the countryside, for example. The benefit of this, of course, is that you have economies of scale of building larger plants that results in cheaper energy. And probably more significantly, there's a great degree of flexibility that's on offer. So you can potentially hedge up to 100% of your load using this mechanism, as I mentioned, for up to 25 years. And the key point, which David also referred to, is that it's basically not your problem. You don't have anything on your property. There's no maintenance required. There's no issues with your insurance, and it's completely managed independently. So while Flow Power is quite an innovative retailer in Australia, this is not something that's new internationally. There are businesses all over the world that are doing this. The model was really born in the US and Mexico for different reasons, but basically it's spreading now around the world. Europe has been the next big market, and Asia Pacific is the fastest growing market. And within that, Australia is projected to be one of the largest markets for these corporate PPAs going forward. There's a number of reasons for that. It's a liberalized market. It's basically for regulatory reasons it's able to happen, which is not always the case in markets. And also, as I'm sure you're all feeling, that energy costs are rising significantly. There's significantly more uncertainty, so this is an increasingly attractive proposition. Now, internationally, we hear, well, probably most people hear the most about companies like Google, Microsoft, Facebook that are doing this, large IT consumer-facing companies, but that's by no means the only companies that are doing this. It's really diversified. We're seeing large industrials, companies like GM, Cemex, big emissions-intensive users. Also, consumer goods manufacturers, Nestle, Unilever, Mars, and it's really, there's a number of drivers. Part of it is a sustainability imperative, a branding exercise, but really, to be clear, the main driver is cost and risk management. So these corporates are not doing this. They're not paying a premium for renewable energy. They're getting their energy at a rate that's competitive or better than what they're paying in the wholesale markets. And they're able, crucially, to lock in their energy rates over the long term, which is, of course, critical for business decision making.
Thank you. So now we're going to look at an example in practice of how this would actually work or potentially work for your business. One of the things that we didn't mention was that in Australia, the way in which the market is structured, you actually require a retailer to be able to deliver this model. And so what we're talking about here is a model that's able to be delivered through a retailer such as Flow Power directly to the customer. So we'll step through. If you look at the chart there, the green line shows a typical business customer's energy use throughout the day. Notably, most customers have higher energy demands during the peak periods of the day. Correspondingly, the black line shows the peak and off-peak rates that a current retailer may offer a customer in the market. So generally, you can conclude that most customers incur most of their costs during the peak periods of the day. It just so happens that solar operates predominantly during the peak hours of the day also. So if we look at the example with solar overlay, which is the orange line here, we can see that the PPA, or the power purchase agreement from the solar generation plant, gives us a fixed price for the generation during the day to the current peak rates that most retailers are offering customers in the market currently. For customers to get access to the generation from plants like solar and potentially wind, but also the ability to lock in that energy price over a long term. So what happens outside of the solar? Well, you still get access to your electricity in the same way you do now, and through Flow Power, we allow customers to buy that from the wholesale market, resulting in additional savings. In fact, the wholesale market is very well suited to solar in that it doesn't require any minimum or maximum consumption from the customer. You only pay for what you use when you use it. So it works very well. So think about the difference that this could make for your business, being able to access energy from a generation plant at potentially less than half the current rates that you're paying during peak periods. The main benefits of this particular model is it's extremely transparent. We actually connect you directly to the generator. You know what their generation costs are, so you know what you're buying the energy from that plant. The ability to lock in long-term price certainty is a key driver for a lot of customers, knowing what their costs are going to be. Being able to lock in a contract for, say, up to 25 years is something that's new to the market and never been seen before. It's extremely flexible in how it can be tailored and how it works for your particular site. There are a number of options that we can employ to specifically tailor a solution for your specific site. Of course, for those customers who want, we can also install panels on your site or on your roof. Now, this may be a desired outcome for certain customers who require or would like to have solar on their site. In a very similar model, we can also install solar on your particular site. We can also buy the excess energy from your site and sell it to other customers who are unable or unwilling to put solar on their sites in the same model that we've just discussed.
So thank you, everybody. We've covered most of what we wanted to cover today. We've been through quite a few things. Hopefully we've explained it well enough for you. At FlowPower, we've been working very hard to make this, open this market up. At the very beginning of the webinar, we explained what the massive opportunity was. We recognised that quite some time ago, and we've been trying to put together a model, and we have now put together a model that now gives you guys, rather than just the big three retailers, the ability to access this very low energy rate. To do that, we've had to work closely with ARENA and the CEFC and other financiers to make all this possible. But it's now possible, and we're very, very excited about what this will mean for the market. We think it will provide massive benefits directly to end users, and we also think it will help fix the broken market that we explained earlier on. So right now I'm going to open it up to questions. So what we'd like you to do is, if you do have a question, we'd like you to type that into your chat window, because we've got quite a number of people online. So I think that will be a practical way that we can start to answer your questions through the chat window. So we'll start reviewing those questions and start answering them now. We will.
Just put you on mute for 2 seconds while we do it.
Yep. Answer it. So we've just had a question come through. How do batteries impact this model? So I'll get David to answer that.
Okay, it's a great question, and the answer is very positively. So batteries can be integrated into this solution at any time. Certainly at the point where battery technology becomes commercially viable from a cost point of view, the opportunities are enormous and the potentials obviously from having battery storage to be able to shift load around from different periods of the day. So battery technology in most cases physically also can be very easily integrated into solar plants which already have a pre-existing grid connection. Most inverters in the market are designed, or the new generation of inverters are designed to take batteries on board. We also have technology that can dispatch the batteries to the market as required to optimize the price. So the benefits are significant. Right now, we're currently modeling different scenarios for our customers to find that particular price point where it makes sense to invest in battery technology.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think another thing to probably add to that is the concept of solar. We're giving you access to solar, and the other thing we haven't mentioned a lot is we'll also give you access to wind power. Yeah. And in theory, if those large battery storage come online, 100 megawatt battery storage, we would also have a view to give you access to portions of that sort of output as well. So that's another way that battery fits into it very well.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So I've just had another question come in here. What customers have signed up for this already? So can I ask
Sure.
Elena to answer that?
Yeah, so at the moment we're working on a couple of deals that are a bit different to what we're talking about today, where they're essentially one or two large customers are taking most of the output of, let's say, a 20 or 30 megawatt facility. So in those cases, they're relatively bespoke deals. It's a tripartite agreement between the plants, the retailer, FlowPower, and the customer. But what we're talking about here is a bit more of a standardized product where anybody can sign up for as much or as little solar PV as you wish. So, for example, not all customers can take a 20 megawatt solar plant based on their load. So we talk about selling, for example, 500 kilowatts, 1 megawatt, and we have a collection of buyers that collectively sign up to a project like that. So at the moment, we're in the stages of quantifying the customers and the loads for that, and once we have a critical mass, we can sign that up to a particular project.
Okay, thank you, Elena. We've got another question here. How much capacity is available? So I might ask Elena again.
Sure. It's a state-by-state question, I guess. I mean, you can contract in any state, but there is some interregional element that's associated with that. So generally, we look to connect customers in a particular state with a solar PV or wind facility in that state. There's ample capacity available. It depends when you need it, of course, but there's as Matthew mentioned, there's a very large pipeline of solar and wind generation, several hundred megawatts of wind that we're currently working with, and about 150 megawatts of solar that would be available in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, excellent. Another question here is, are you looking at all states in Australia? And that's an easy question to answer.
Everything except WA.
Everything except WA. Yeah.
NT.
And NT and Northern Territory. Another question: how do we actually get to the next steps? David?
Yep. So the next step will be for our customers to sign on to these power purchase agreements. So we'll be sending agreements or contract documents for our customers to obviously review and sign on and buy a percentage of output from these plants. And then based on that, we will then be obviously negotiating on behalf of the customers the rates and the terms that are appropriate for our customers. So we hope to have that process completed in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be contacting all our existing and new customers to...
Yeah, so we're ready to actually provide offers. We would need the time to understand your load.
Yeah.
And then literally offers will go out once we've matched you to the right load. Really? Another question here is, does a customer sign up to a committed usage, or does one sign up to a variable quantity? So I can answer that if you like. Essentially what you would do is you would sign up to a percentage of the output of the plant. So it's literally entirely equivalent to installing a 100 kilowatt panels on your roof. Whatever output would be from whatever you put on your roof is the same output you would get from this remote solar farm. So it's one for one in terms of how it works in that sense.
I think maybe to clarify on that, you know, it is, as Matthew mentioned, it's a proportion of the output of the solar farm. We don't want to have a case where we have 10 customers on a solar farm, everybody's contracting X megawatt hours of energy, and then, you know, for whatever reason, that the solar farm is not able to deliver. So you will know in advance exactly what output you've contracted, and that will be done on an interval basis.
I've got a question here, David. I think you can answer this one. How are network charges for transmission addressed?
Okay, so then this particular model won't affect the network charges on your bill. Through the energy is transferred virtually from the plant to your site through the NEM, and that's done through the retailer. So the network charges would remain as they are. The only consideration that would need to be taken into account is the loss factors for the generation site and the loss factors for your particular site in sizing the correct amount of generation that you need.
Which will, when we go through the process of putting an offer, we'll take all that into account and,
yes,
and get all that sized for you. Another question is, what happens when there is insufficient renewable energy available? Does the customer then automatically switch to the wholesale market? And if so, how do they control this?
Yep. Do you want me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer is yes. There are a number of options that are available for consumption outside of solar generation. They can be directly at the floating wholesale price, but they can also be at a hedged floating price, meaning that we can actually give you the equivalent of a fixed price for those periods outside of solar, which would be backed by a contract, or potentially for a customer who can manage load would be another opportunity for the customer to use physical load curtailment to manage any potential risk.
Yeah.
One of the important considerations, however, is when you look at solar, the generation, in particular solar, when you look at the generation, it tends to occur during the high demand periods of the day. So we tend to see an offsetting of risk or offsetting of volatility through the solar generation. So it's actually a very good fit for the wholesale market.
You've also got to keep in mind that disparity of price that we spoke about at the beginning. The solar energy is coming in very, very cheaply as well. So if there is a little bit going back to the wholesale market, it's really a minor issue in terms of the overall scheme of the.
Yeah, essentially under this model, you're getting a lot of wins through the low cost energy, which covers for you for some of the cost in the wholesale market.
Yeah.
One other point from the project side is that much like with a rooftop or on-site solar PV installation, there are guarantees associated with the energy delivered. So the project developer owner operator provides guarantees over the availability of the plant, and those guarantees will be passed to the customer.
So, are there any other points we want to cover today? So please keep typing in questions if you've got them. In the meantime, we'll be in contact with you all. We encourage you all to make contact with us as well. So I've got a question here. So if the solar plant is offline, what price applies? So at the moment, that, as David was referring to, what will apply will be the wholesale electricity price at that time. So there is a component of management required with those aspects. You've got to remember our model is one of transparency, where we're passing through the benefits of the market. So depending on the nature of your load, if you've got the ability to control load, then you can deal with it by controlling your load. And our systems here will assist you with that. Basically, a black box would be installed to help assist with that. If you don't have that ability, you would need some other financial product to be put in place to protect against those times when the solar is not generating. And like I said before, as large battery storage farms come online, we'll give you access to that as well. So as that need arises, as that variability increases, then as these new technologies come online, we'll be aiming to provide you with the same ability to buy components of that to help protect against those changes as well.
It probably raises a very good point in that with a traditional retail model, this is very difficult to achieve, because retailers rely on a certain amount of energy being purchased by the customer and a certain load profile. So to have solar come into that profile and reduce a portion of that load is a very difficult. It's difficult in the current market for most retailer models to make this work. Where combined with the wholesale market, it actually makes it extremely easy, and it allows for easy adoption of the solar generation into the customer's consumption profile.
And again, on the plant being offline, I mean, if the plant is offline or not generating because, you know, it's nighttime or something obvious, then we can plan for that. If there is unexpected outages at the plant, again, that's generally covered contractually between the generator and the customer or flow power. So it's not the case that if the plant has a fault, that's the issue of the operator, that then a customer would be exposed to the wholesale market, that the generator is required to make compensations for that. It's only things like scheduled maintenance that will be known about in advance, and of course the nighttime hours where there will be exposure to the wholesale market.
And just someone's asked about the off-peak and what happens with off-peak, and whether that's the same applies, and yes, broadly, but also remember this is more than just solar as well, so we can match you against wind, which has a profile that goes 24/7. So when you start to match these different technologies, you start to get very, very good coverage coming in at rates that are well below market. So there are a few more questions. Well, here's why isn't anybody else offering this?
Good question.
I could take you back to that slide towards the start where the big three have the monopoly of the market, and they're there to, I guess, make profits. So I might, if David flies back through it, there you go. That might be the reason why no one's offering it so far, but our model is definitely to open this up, and I think you'll actually find a number of retailers come online with these types of offers as we develop and open up this market, and I think you'll find very quickly there will be other people come in and start to compete with what is a massive monopoly in the market.
Yeah, I think on that point, it's something that's really been a case of consumer-driven demand, as we've seen in some other sectors, and as I mentioned before, internationally, this is quite a popular model, and again, it's really been driven by the customers who have demanded to have this access to this low-cost energy. So now we're seeing the same demand from customers, particularly those big international customers that we showed before, to do this, and really it requires a flexible and innovative retailer, given the regulations in Australia, which can be a little bit challenging compared with the US, for example. It requires a flexible and innovative retailer or retailers to offer this product. So it requires a bit more work on our side. It's a bit more thinking, it's a bit more challenging, but certainly it's a lot more rewarding as well.
Yeah, so hopefully that's answered that. So I think you'll find others will eventually offer it, particularly once people start signing up to it. They'll be forced to offer it through competition. Here's an interesting one. Can we use the daytime solar without the panels to charge our own on-site battery storage for off-peak use?
Yeah, there's no reason why you can't potentially employ that scenario. You have to view the economics of it, but certainly you could draw energy from the grid that's at a fixed price from the solar generation that you know about, charge the batteries, and obviously use that internally during higher price periods. So a good example of that would be the more expensive periods of the day outside of peak evenings, outside of solar, so such as the peak evening demand would be a great example where you could do that.
Yeah, comments being made there. It's called batteries without the panels.
Nice.
So,
I have to apologize for my mathematics on this slide. I'm giving the retailers extra profit there with the 25 cents. It should be 23 cents.
no. Whoops. If paired up with wind for off-peak use, are the rates likely to be similar to the solar rates in your slide?
Good question. I mean, these kind of things are necessarily site-specific and load-specific equation. I think on balance, wind is generally a little bit cheaper than solar. On balance, it depends where you are and what's your load and so on. And of course, there's the benefit of having a relatively more flat profile where you get some additional generation in the off-peak periods. So there is potential. I don't want to create a lot of work for us. There is potential to combine the two. And there are a number of hybrid wind and solar plants being developed in the country now, where you have a quite complementary profile so that you cover peak and off-peak much more holistically.
Yep. Yeah. So the answer would be yes. With wind being more competitive than solar in the market today, the expectations is that the rates there would be very similar to what we're seeing here. Mm-hmm. And we can definitely match both wind and solar on a site, yes, depending on the shape and requirements. Okay. So I think we're coming towards the end of the webinar. I really very much appreciate all the questions that have come through. I think it's been very helpful. I think it's been a great discussion. I know we're very excited about everything that we're doing. And I hope that you've got a bit of a picture of the results in terms of what the opportunity is. As you can see, we're having a little bit of trouble getting there you go, look at that, the end slide. So we'd really appreciate some input, your input into how this presentation went. So we might send out a brief survey about that just to get your feedback to make sure we've covered everything that you wanted to hear. You're also very welcome to give us a call at any time to discuss your needs. Yeah, and I hope you all have a great afternoon, and I hope you're as excited as we are about this exciting new opportunity that's in the market. So thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.